Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. Today we are checking out Nvidia's new GeForce RTX 4070 Super, and this is the first model to be released in the new Super Series refresh. And I'll be slotting it at the previous RTX 4070 MSRP, so $600 US. That's pretty exciting. But before we get into it, today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Ugreen and their new lineup of Nexode Pro Series chargers. The Nexode Pro Mini offers 65 watts of fast charging from a single port and can charge up to 3 devices at once via 2 USB-C ports and 1 USB Type-A port. Or for super fast charging, the Nexode Pro 100 watt charger offers not only additional power, but also the ability to charge devices such as a Mac Pro from 0 to 86% in just 60 minutes. But if that's not enough, the Nexode Pro 160 has you covered with hyperfast 140 watt charging from a single port. All Ugreen Nexode Pro chargers feature AirPyra and GaNfinity technology to allow very impressive charging from a very compact unit and are compatible with all modern smartphones, tablets, and laptops. If you'd like to see the rest of the Nexode Pro lineup, then for more information, please check the links in the video description. Okay, so the 4070 Super uses the same AD104 silicon as the other 4070 series products, but with much more silicon enabled when compared to the standard 4070. There's 22% more CUDA cores, so just 7% less than that of the TI model. It also gets the same 48MB L2 cache as the TI. Then, like the 4070 and 4070 Ti, it uses a 192-bit wide memory bus, using 12GB of 21GB per second GDDR6X memory for a bandwidth of 504GB per second. So based on those specifications, the 4070 Super should be around 20% faster than the 4070 for the same price, so that's pretty good. It does still only have 12GB of memory, which is a bit stiff at the $600 US price point, but at least performance overall should be much better. The improved performance should also help the 4070 Super better compete with the much cheaper Radeon RX 7800 XT, at least in terms of value. The Radeon GPU did force Nvidia to discount the RTX 4070 to $550, and this is where it will remain, so this is an official price cut. And that does mean that the original 4070 will continue to exist, coming in $50 less than the Super model, and Nvidia again has noted that this is a new official MSRP for that part. I do expect though that the RTX 4070 will quickly find itself down around $500 alongside the 7800 XT, because who's going to be enticed to save $50 on what will be a much slower GPU? Surely you'd just go with the newer 4070 Super model. Anyway, we'll take a look at the performance and then we'll dive into the cost per frame analysis. For testing, we're using our Ryzen 7 7800X 3D test system with 32GB of DDR5 6000 memory using the latest display drivers. All data has been validated and updated for this video, and I'll be using the Nvidia Founders Edition of the 4070 Super. In total, I've tested 12 games, some with and without ray tracing, and the resolutions of focus for this review will be 1440p and 4K. Okay, let's take a look at what we have. First up, we have a Plague Tale Requiem, and at 1440p, the 4070 Super is offering a 16% performance bump over the standard 4070, and that's enough to make it 7% faster than the 7800 XT and just 5% slower than the 4070 Ti. Then at 4K, we're looking at 53 FPS on average, making the 4070 Super just 4% faster than the 7800 XT, but again just 5% slower than the 4070 Ti. We're also looking at a 15% uplift when compared to the standard 4070, so a good result there. The gains in Resident Evil 4 over the original 4070 are less impressive at 1440p. Here the new Super variant was just 12% faster, averaging 140 FPS. Still, that did make it 9% faster than the 7800 XT, though interestingly, despite that, it was still 10% slower than the 4070 Ti. Again, the Radeon GPU is able to close the gap at the 4K resolution, as here the 4070 Super was just 4% faster than the 7800 XT, and it was still 9% slower than the 4070 Ti, but this time 17% faster than the original 4070. You'd probably expect the 4070 Super to leave the 7800 XT behind in Cyberpunk 2077, but without ray tracing enabled, the results are highly competitive. The GeForce GPU was just 2% faster. This is a much needed boost though for Nvidia in this matchup, given that the 4070 Super is 18% faster than the standard 4070. We're still looking at just a 2% margin in favour of the 4070 Super at 4K, rendering just a single extra frame over the 7800 XT, and this time we are looking at a big 24% boost over the standard 4070. Hogwarts Legacy further demonstrates just how in need of a performance boost Nvidia was at the $600 price point. The 4070 Super is just 3% faster than the 7800 XT at 1440p, despite offering a massive 26% increase over the standard 4070. Unfortunately though, the 4070 Super still slipped behind the 7800 XT at 4K, rendering 47 FPS on average, making it 8% slower. Oddly, the 4070 Super was just 4% faster than the standard 4070 here, though it was also just 2% slower than the 4070 Ti, strongly suggesting that VRAM capacity is the bottleneck here for these 4070 series products. Next up, we have the new Avatar game, and here the 4070 Super is very impressive, averaging 83 FPS to make it 20% faster than the original 4070 and 26% faster than the 7800 XT. Moreover, it was just 10% slower than the 4070 Ti and 8% slower than the 7900 XT. Then at 4K, we're looking at 46 FPS on average, which is a 28% increase over the 7800 XT and 21% over the standard 4070. It was also once again just 10% slower than the 4070 Ti, so a great result here for the new 4070 Super. Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered using the very high preset is no challenge for these newer mid-range to high-end GPUs. The 4070 Super averaged 184 FPS, which is a 19% boost over the 7800 XT and a 16% uplift from the standard 4070. Then at the 4K resolution, the average frame rate does drop off, but we're still looking at a very impressive 103 FPS, and that's an 18% increase over the 7800 XT and a similar 16% improvement over the standard 4070. This also meant that the Super was just 6% slower than the 4070 Ti. The Last of Us Part 1 results are quite competitive between the 4070 Super and 7800 XT, though the GeForce GPU did get the win here, offering 6% more performance at 1440p. And again, this illustrates just how in need Nvidia were for that 18% boost from the standard 4070. Jumping up to the 4K resolution reduced the average frame rate to 46 FPS, and now the 4070 Super was just 5% faster than the 7800 XT, though it was a massive 31% faster than the 4070, which is more than we'd typically expect to see, so it would seem as though the larger L2 cache plays a key role here. Next up we have Dying Light 2, and here the 4070 Super easily beats the 7800 XT by a 23% margin, though it does also cost 20% more, so it is worth keeping that in mind. Still, 108 FPS on average is a great result, and it meant that the new Super variant is just 9% slower than the Ti. Jumping up to the 4K resolution, we see that the margin remains much the same. Here it's 20% faster than the 7800 XT, as well as the RTX 4070. So previously Nvidia was offering the same level of performance as AMD in this title, but with a 20% price premium. So it's good to see that the 4070 Super does correct that. Now our Starfield results have all been updated using the latest version of the game, and at 1440p, the 4070 Super was good for 67 FPS on average, making it 10% faster than the 7800 XT and 18% faster than the standard 4070. And that 10% margin's maintained at 4K, though the 4070 Super was only good for 44 FPS on average, so you will need to use upscaling here, and thankfully Starfield does now support a DLSS. Another new game to be added to our Day 1 reviews is Alan Wake 2. Testing at 1440p sees the 4070 Super beating the 7800 XT by a 10% margin, as it was just 7% slower than the 4070 Ti. Then at 4K, it's still 9% faster than the Radeon GPU, and exactly 20% faster than the original 4070, so a really good result there. The second last game tested is Watch Dogs Legion, and here the 4070 Super averaged 152 FPS at 1440p, making it 10% faster than the 7800 XT and 18% faster than the 4070. Then, as we've seen a number of times now, increasing the resolution does see the 7800 XT close in, and now the 4070 Super is just 5% faster, despite trailing the 4070 Ti by a mere 7% margin. And the last game we're going to look at is Hitman 3, and this is a poor title for AMD. As a result, the 4070 Super easily defeats the 7800 XT, delivering 31% more performance and, impressively, even a 26% boost over the standard 4070. However, once we jump up to the 4K resolution, the 7800 XT fares much better, rendering 90 FPS on average, making the 4070 Super just 2% faster, an insignificant margin. We're still seeing a 16% boost over the 4070 though. Okay, so although we didn't go over the 1080p results, I did record the data, so here's a quick look at the 12 game average. The 4070 Super was on average 10% faster than the 7800 XT and 15% faster than the 4070, while it was just 5% slower than the 4070 Ti. Jumping up to 1440p, we see the results are now heavily GPU limited, so we get a better idea of how they really compare. Here the 4070 Super is 13% faster than the 7800 XT and 19% faster than the 4070, so a good step up there. It was again only slightly slower than the Ti model, trailing by a 6% margin. However, the 4K resolution remains a bit problematic for the 4070 Super and its battle with the Radeon RX 7800 XT, as the Radeon GPU fares much better at the higher resolution, and as a result the GeForce GPU is now just 9% faster, which isn't amazing given that it should cost around 20% more. It was still 18% faster than the 4070, as both suffer from the same narrow 192-bit wide memory bus. Now for a quick look at ray tracing performance, and we'll start with A Plague Tale Requiem. Here the 4070 Super was good for 97 FPS at 1080p, making it a massive 45% faster than the 7800 XT, which averaged just 67 FPS. The margins were similar at 1440p. Here the Super was 42% faster than the 7800 XT, and just 5% slower than the 4070 Ti. Interestingly though, it was just 14% faster than the standard 4070, so although it crushes the Radeon competition, it's not worlds faster than the original 4070. Ray tracing performance is competitive in Resident Evil 4. Here both the 7800 XT and 4070 Super rendered around 160 FPS, and in this example, the 4070 Super was barely any faster than the 4070. That said, it does pull ahead at 1440p, though we're still only seeing a 12% uplift over the original 4070, but more importantly, it's now 16% faster than the 7800 XT. Cyberpunk 2077 sees the 4070 Super delivering 33% more performance than the 7800 XT at 1080p using the medium quality ray tracing preset. That said, it's not much faster than the standard 4070 in this example. Then at 1440p, it's 12% faster than the standard 4070 and once again 33% faster than the 7800 XT, so a good result overall. Spider-Man Remastered is CPU limited at 1080p, so there's not much that we can really take away from these results, apart from the fact that the 4070 Super is 6% faster than the 7800 XT here, but I expect that margin to grow as we increase the resolution, so let's go do that. Okay, so at 1440p, the 4070 Super is now 15% faster than the 7800 XT, and even then the Super appears to be CPU limited, so let's quickly take a look at the 4K data. Upping the resolution to 4K does extend the margin to 24%, and now we find the Super providing 4070 Ti-like performance, which is impressive to see. Fortnite's been a positive ray tracing title for the Radeon GPUs, but here the 4070 Super is able to pull ahead of the 7800 XT, though only by a narrow 6% margin. Again, it was just 13% faster than the standard 4070 and 6% slower than the Ti model. Then at 1440p, the 7800 XT and 4070 Super are neck and neck with 60 FPS, which is frankly similar to what we saw from the standard 4070. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is another game that is quite heavily CPU limited with ray tracing enabled at 1080p, and as a result the 4070 Super is just 15% faster than the 7800 XT. Still, jumping up to 1440p only increases that margin to 20%, which is a decent win for the 4070 Super, but again, it should cost around 20% more. Now here's a look at the 6-game average at 1080p, and keep in mind some of this data was CPU limited. On average, the 4070 Super was 17% faster than the 7800 XT, and just 5% faster than the 4070, though it was also just 7% slower than the 4070 Ti. At 1440p, the margin extends slightly to 20%, and now the Super is 9% faster than the standard 4070 and 8% slower than the Ti model. Then at 4K the margin is reduced, and now the 4070 Super is 18% faster than the 7800 XT. Of course, if we included games such as Alan Wake 2 as an example, that would further tip things in the GeForce GPU's favour. But for this narrow selection of games, the margins aren't as extreme as you might expect. Now, when it comes to power consumption, the 4070 Super is very good. Testing with Hitman 3 shows it pushing total system usage 32 watts lower than that of the 7800 XT, while delivering 31% more performance in that example. Power efficiency in Spider-Man Remastered was also excellent, again consuming 46 watts less than the 7800 XT, while delivering almost 20% more performance. So incredible stuff there from Nvidia. Now it's time for the cost per frame data, and as you'd expect, we're looking at a solid improvement over the standard 4070, even when accounting for the newly discounted price of $550. Despite knocking $50 off the 4070, the new 4070 Super is still able to reduce the cost per frame by 9%, basically matching the value of the much cheaper Radeon RX 7700 XT. This also makes the 4070 Super by far the best value 40 series product. That said though, it does still cost 6% more per frame than this 7800 XT. But still, that is a good result for Nvidia, as we believe Radeon GPUs need to cost at least 10% less before even considering them as an alternative. And we believe this as Nvidia offers a better set of features that often provide higher quality. You also get superior ray tracing performance and much better power efficiency. So there is a premium associated with all of that. And based on past polls, the vast majority of viewers agree. Now, if we look at the current retail pricing for the models that are currently available on the retail market, we find a slightly less favourable matchup for AMD between the 7800 XT and 4070 Super, as the 7800 XT is currently at least $10 US over MSRP. We also end up with a number of Radeon 6000 series products in the mix, though parts such as the 6700 XT, which offer great value, they are much slower. The 4070 Super is right there though, the only GeForce GPU to drop below a cost of $6 per frame based on our data, and at $600 US it makes it really difficult to recommend the 7800 XT at $510 US. The original 4070 though, it's quite poor in terms of value, as it does cost 14% more per frame than the slightly overpriced 7800 XT. Alright, time for a quick look at the operating behaviour of the 4070 Super, and we'll start with Nvidia's Founders Edition model. When installed inside an ATX case with a room temperature of 21 degrees, this is how the card ran after an hour of load. We saw a peak junction temperature of 66 degrees, with a hotspot temperature of 78 degrees, while the memory also hit 78 degrees. That said, the card could just be heard over our case fans with a fan speed of 1700 RPM, resulting in an operating volume of just 35 decibels. So certainly not loud, but you could just hear it. Under these conditions, it managed to average a core clock frequency of 2775 MHz, and of course the memory was clocked at 2625 MHz for a transfer speed of 21 gigabits per second. Also on hand for testing, we have the Asus Dual RTX 4070 Super, which is a more typical looking entry-level graphics card. It is a dual fan model with a dual BIOS, but it doesn't use dual 8-pin PCIe power connectors, rather a single 12-volt high-powered connector will do. Under the exact same test conditions as the Founders Edition model, the Asus Dual saw a peak junction temperature of just 64 degrees with a hotspot temperature of 74 degrees, and both are cooler than what we saw with the FE model. That said though, the memory did peak at 86 degrees, which is quite a bit hotter than the FE model, though with a lower 1400 RPM fan speed it was also quieter at 32 decibels. As for the operating clocks, the cores typically ran at 2715 MHz, so a 2% reduction when compared to the FE model, though this is unlikely to really change the results just seen in our bar graphs. Now, the reason for the higher than expected memory temperatures is in part due to the thick thermal pads, which aren't that efficient to begin with. Then they're transferring the heat to a thin aluminium spreader, and the right bank of memory chips doesn't have any direct cooling above the spreader, so it's a pretty inefficient design all around. Still, the memory is cooled, and temperatures did remain within safe margins throughout our testing. Then lastly, we also have the Gigabyte Eagle OC, which is another base model graphics card, this time using a compact triple fan cooler. And this cooler was also featured on the standard RTX 4070, and I'm sad to say it was one of the worst performing models in our 4070 roundup, hitting a peak GPU hotspot temperature of 73 degrees, but with a fan speed of almost 2000 RPM. So as you might expect, strapping that same cooler on an even higher powered GPU hasn't exactly improved the results. In fact, predictably, it's worse. The junction temperature is now hitting 70 degrees, which isn't that far off the hotspot temperature of the FE model. And that's a problem because it meant that we were seeing a hotspot temperature of 85 degrees for the GPU. That's not great, and making it even worse was the horrible 2100 RPM fan speed, making for a very hot and loud graphics card at 38 decibels. The memory temperatures were reasonable though, peaking at 76 degrees, so slightly better than the FE model and much better than the Asus Dual. We also saw an average operating frequency of 2760 MHz for the cores, so similar to that of the FE model. I should stress though that while the loudest and hottest of the models tested here, the Gigabyte Eagle OC, it isn't crazy loud, I think most will find it easy to live with, but that being said, it's an unimpressive model that I recommend you avoid. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the upgrade Nvidia's offering here at the $600 US price point. We're getting about 20% better gaming performance for the same price. Pretty hard to argue with that. That said, I can't help but feel as though this is what the RTX 4070 should have been from the start, at least 20% faster. Probably should have cost $500 as well, but at this point I'll take what I can get. Had the RTX 4070 landed back in April of 2023, with 20% better performance than it ultimately had, it would have not only sold significantly better than it did, but Nvidia probably wouldn't have required a mid-cycle refresh in an effort to try and boost sales. Of course, this has always been the plan, offer as little as they can get away with initially, allowing them to provide a decent mid-cycle refresh to get gamers all excited again. This achieves two things for Nvidia. It allows them to maximize margins while also pushing out the release cycle for a new generation to every 2 years. But again, with a worthwhile mid-cycle refresh to avoid stagnating sales. So, we've got the RTX 4070 Super now, but should you buy it? Assuming AMD doesn't make any last-minute pricing adjustments to the Radeon RX 7800 XT, which I won't be shocked if they do, but I'm not leaving this video until the last minute to find out, then the 4070 Super would be my new go-to GPU at this price range, so roughly $500 to $600 US. And the 4070 Super might cost $90 to $100 more than the 7800 XT, which is a reasonable premium, 18 to 20% more, but when accounting for all the additional rasterization performance that you get, it's a mere 4% increase in cost per frame, or 6% if AMD is actually able to hit their own $500 US MSRP. Therefore, once you factor in the additional features, stuff like better ray tracing performance and much better power efficiency, the 4070 Super becomes a no-brainer for me. It's my opinion that AMD needs to discount the 7800 XT to $450 for it to become the more obvious choice. And I do like that the 7800 XT has 16 gigabytes of VRAM, which I feel should be the minimum at this price point. So while that's certainly a strength of the Radeon GPU, it still has a lot of things working against it, and many of those disadvantages can be realized today. Speaking of features, you might have noticed we didn't provide any upscaling benchmarks, and we didn't look at frame generation. And that's because both of those technologies really require their own dedicated content, which we've already done. Generally speaking, we believe that DLSS offers superior image quality to that of FSR, so benchmarking Nvidia GPUs with DLSS and AMD GPUs with FSR, it's an unfair comparison. This is because while the performance uplift overall is similar, the bar graphs completely ignore the fact that the image quality can be better with the Nvidia GPU. Then we have frame generation, which we believe to be a frame smoothing technology, not a performance enhancing technology, and therefore it's not fit for use in benchmark graphs. This applies to both AMD and Nvidia's implementations of the technology. Anyway, back to the 4070 Super. If you've been holding out on your upgrade and you've got around $600 to spend, I think the 4070 Super, it's about as good as things are going to get for a while. That is unless, AMD reduces prices, which I'd say they're likely to do, but we'll have to wait and see what they do end up doing over the next few weeks and how official those price cuts are, and if they're not just attempts to try and steal Nvidia's thunder with the new Super Series, because that's always disappointing when you see those very limited time only deals around the release of a competing product. Anyway, we'll wait and see. We'll do some follow-up comparisons and look into all of that stuff. But yeah, for now, we are done with this one. And I'm glad to be done because bit of a rough week. If you guys can't tell, my voice is still not fully recovered. Ended up getting the flu when I started doing this review. Not sure if that's a sign of something. The last time I got a flu was 4 months ago, and that was when I was reviewing the 7800 XT, and Tim had to present that video. If this video had to be filmed the day before, Tim would have been presenting it because I had no voice yesterday, but it's come back today and I was able to get this done. So yeah, it's been a rough week though, benchmarking with the flu. Not a whole lot of fun. Hopefully for the upcoming 4070 Ti Super and the 4080 Super, and I think there's a 7600 XT in there. Hopefully they'll be nice and healthy, so I'll get to enjoy those ones. Anyway, that's pretty much it. We've got Floatplane Patreon. You guys know the deal with those. If you want to get stuff like exclusive access to our Discord server, monthly live streams with Tim and myself, behind the scenes content, Q&As, all that cool stuff, then yeah, check out either one of those things for a very small fee. You get access to some pretty cool perks. Yeah, above all else, thank you very much for watching. I'm your host, Steve. See you next time.